Hello, hello, and welcome to the Weeder Life podcast. I'm your host, Erica Weederlight, and I am the CEO and founder of We the Light. I help humans who feel inadequate, broken, self-conscious, and shamed around their sexuality to reclaim their aliveness, their power, and to have a renewed relationship to pleasure while preparing themselves to feel hella confident to date others and themselves. AKA, I'm guiding people to live their #best lives. I have to give you a fair warning. I do unfortunately swear like a drunken sailor, so if you do have little ones by you, just be sure to pop in some earbuds. All right, friends, let's buckle up and let's rock it to this week's episode. Hi, everyone, and welcome back. I personally am so psyched for this episode because I have this amazing human with me that I personally love so much. She has helped me so much, and I just really, really wanted her to be part of the pod, wanted to have her on. And before we, get talking, we start flowing and having good conversation, I wanted to read her baby bio. I could talk about her for hours. So I really tried to take sentences out. I was like, and then Amy does this, and then Amy does this. And I was like, Erica, stop. You'll talk about this in the conversation. So the abridged version is Amy, in my personal opinion, is an amazing, amazing, amazing Tantra coach. She's passionate about sharing sacred sexuality and the healing that it brings. Her mission is to build a platform of sexual health and education programs. She brings awareness to sexual trauma and the power of Tantra practices to heal. Her mission includes sensuality, embodiment, liberation, and expression, thank God. And she guides people to love their bodies and to live a more connected, desire-filled life. It's just amazing. I'm just obsessed with you. Oh, and by the way, I just went right into it. Her name is Amy. I was like, my friend. Everyone's like, who is this? I was just so excited. Can't wait to talk. My friend, Amy Jindra. I'm just so excited to have you here today. Welcome to the fucking pod. I can't wait to talk about all the things.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a nice lead in, and I was just like, ooh, drum roll, what's her name? Who's this?
Yeah, I was like, oh, I did. I'm like, this person. And then they're like, who is the person? Can we, and later, obviously, we'll point you to your gram and your work, but my amazing friend, Amy Jindra. I'm like, here we are, take the stage. I have 1,000,007 questions, I want to ask. And I think, personally, we've worked together one-on-one. And I remember, you were like, okay, let's get to the exercises. And I remember, our work together, I was like, Amy, tell me all about the history. So there's a part of me that loves, Tantra history and all of that. And I'm sure there'll be space for that conversation today. But before we jump into that, can you tell us how the fuck you got here and I don't know what sparked your interest in this? I mean, it's for a specific, we'll talk about it, it's a specific person, but how'd you get here?
Yeah, I would be happy to share that. It's a long and winding story. I'll try to be concise. So I grew up in a really religious household in the Bible Belt in Texas, and I didn't fit in. I didn't really relate, which, led to a lot of shame being internalized, a lot of guilt for being who I am and how I am. And I had sexual abuse growing up, which when you grow up in a purity culture where we don't talk about sex, it's nearly impossible to open your voice and be like, hey, this happened, or this is what's going on, because it's all seen as shameful and dark and dirty. And so that's a big part of my work, is to open that up and create a shameless environment so people can share and prevent sexual abuse. But basically, I didn't fit into where I came from. And I was just kind of biding my time of I feel really connected to what a higher power, whether you call that God or the universe or goddess, whatever you call that. I always had a really strong connection. So when it came to religion, I was just like, I know God. I know how I feel when I feel connected. So whenever I was an adult, I hadn't really healed these wounds, and I didn't really think about it too much. I was striving to check all the boxes. So maybe that I would be accepted by my family and successful in society and not feel so broken and like a bystander in life. I almost felt like I was pretending, and I was just like, okay, life is happening. Like, let me check all these boxes. Am I doing it right? Somebody please tell me I'm doing this right. And I ended up in a life that I curated to please other people, and it didn't make me happy. And that process of undoing was incredibly painful, but also what I needed to really grow those muscles of being who I am and standing up for myself. And I found Tantra years ago. I was in Bible school and I was a missionary.
That I did not expect that.
Yeah, so I was a missionary, and I was like, I'm going to be a pastor's wife, and the whole like golden Christian dream, and marry a good one, whatever that is. And you start reading about other religions to learn how to convert them or find the inlets of like how you can talk to other religions. And in Hindu tradition, there's a lot of goddesses. And that's something that I severely have been looking for my entire life, of like a divinity that's feminine, that I can relate to, that understands me, that doesn't shame me for being born a woman or feel less than. I would look at my brothers and I'd be like, wait, I'm smarter than you. Like, I'm stronger than this one. Like, what? I'm not less than. Like, this makes no sense to me. This story just doesn't fit like what I'm seeing in real life. So when I was in Bible school and they touched on Hindu pantheon of like gods and goddesses, I was like, what? I'd never even heard these concepts that they had goddesses that they worshiped. And, in Bible school, you're shut down for asking too many questions. And, it's seen as pagan, and, the devil works through the goddess and the serpent and all these things. So all of these themes, they were automatically demonized. But in me, I was so curious, and I was like, I need to do more research, in order to convert them. I need to know more. And I really just started to feel something in that there was an active aliveness and connection through that I didn't come to study until much later. And whenever I found myself in a loveless, sexless marriage and having a job that looked good on paper but gave me no fulfillment, and just really I had pushed myself and my own voice so far down, I didn't know what I sounded like anymore. And whenever I really started to dig into that, I started to work out and do Pilates and go to bar class. And it really started in my body. And if you've ever taken Pilates, it's a lot of core work. It's a lot of pelvic floor work. And what ended up happening is I was in a bar Pilates class, and I just started having these waves of orgasm flow through my body. And for someone who has been so shut down emotionally, mentally, and physically and sexually, I was like, what is this? And I just needed to know what I was experiencing. And so I started searching and contacting different teachers and trying to figure out what my body was experiencing, because I was experiencing pleasure, what seemed like for the first time. And it had this profound effect on the way that I saw the world. It changed my thought process. I was like, wow, I don't really know the world. And I began to grow in curiosity. And I remember there were two teachers that I resonated with. One was a Taoist teacher, and one was, she didn't claim Tantra, but there was something about her that I was like, I just feel really drawn to go with this teacher. And my best friend went to go study with the other one. I went to go study with my teacher. And it was what I had been searching for, in a way, where it was embracing of my own body, embracing of my own sexuality, embracing of my power, the divinity that comes with being a woman, and not putting down masculinity or the male form at all, but seeing both as divine. And that for me just clicked and made so much sense. And when I started studying Tantra, it was in the West from a white woman who studied in India for about 10 years. And she was going in the direction of like, I want a TV show and, we're all going to be millionaires and just this very capitalist view. So you kind of have to separate sometimes the teachings and the teacher and the context. And it took me a while to sift through all of that. And, I think I still do because we see everything through the lens of who we are and how we're raised and how society sees us and how our brains work. So parts of that experience of working so closely with her, I was just like, yeah, I'm not in this for the money. I'm not in this to be so powerful and like to be wealthy. Like I'm in this because it makes sense for me and my body, and it makes sense for me and what I believe, and I feel alive. And I think for me, for so long, the things that I came alive to were demonized. And I wasn't allowed to explore what made me happy. I didn't come from one of those kind of households. I didn't have that kind of childhood that encouraged you to live your dreams. It was like, no, 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 get back in line. And for me, I really dove headfirst. And I didn't have a plan. I didn't have an idea of what this would mean in my life. I just was like, this is where we're at. This is what I'm present to. And I just dove in 100%, which led me to connecting with other people that study Tantra. And this specific lineage that I study is a Hindu-based Tantra, and it's also the left-hand path. So the left-hand path of Tantra is a little more taboo. Everything is seen as sacred, and our sexuality and sensuality is seen as sacred, along with other taboo things like death and like things that normally we don't see as being actively divine. And for me, the allure of that is, as an outlier myself, I'm like, oh, I can get behind this. I understand this. But what I didn't understand was the discipline that it requires to really honor the path, and the discipline of keeping your body in practice, keeping your mind in practice, and mastering your own energy, knowing where you're leaking, knowing where you're forcing, knowing where you're impinging on other people, knowing where my wounds are so that I can, one, protect myself, but also the people around me, let them know, like, hey, this is a soft spot for me. Like, if we continue down this path, like, I'm either going to lash out at you, I'm going to disappear, or things are going to get real funky. And I think on the spiritual path, people think that you get to the place and where everything's groovy and easy and no more pain, no more tears, the former you has passed away. And it's like, what Tantra has taught me is that you focus on the duality. Like you focus on the shadow and the light. You focus on the masculine, the feminine. You focus on these dualities and you worship them and you study them to get more information. But then when you're experiencing the practice, that's when you experience the non-duality, which is said to be the truth of the universe. Is like, joke's on us. It's all the same.
It's so good. You hit on every single and more. You hit on every point that I want to talk about today. But I don't know if I just want to I had to bring this up. I don't know if you saw I was getting teary-eyed because when you were talking about especially the teachings and the teacher conversation, and I really appreciate you bringing that to light, how gorgeous teachings can be, and we're all human, we can get funky, things can arise. And I know actually we talked about this, I think a few years ago one-on-one, and I came to you and I was saying like, I'm scarred by my teacher, some of my teachers. Some of them held me exquisitely, and that was one of the privileges of working with you, was like, first of all, working with you to blow a little smoke up your ass, but like I felt very clean with you. Like it wasn't like this like get rich quick scheme. Like it was so integrous, and you're like, no, bitch, I'm gonna hold you through this work. And I really want to like thank you for that and like honor you for that. And I just wanted to like briefly bring that up and thank you for that, because I'm sure people that are listening to this podcast, have had or trusted like a therapist or a practitioner or a coach and been burned. And it's really fucking hard to continue. I know for me, it's taken many years. I've had a few teachers that I'm like, ugh, like have like fantastic teachings, beautiful teachings. And like, I have some crunch, around. So I thank you for like voicing like that there still could be divinity in it and you could still come back to, the teacher. So I just wanted to like frame that. That like brought me to tears. Like you worded that really beautifully. Thank you.
Yeah. And I think that that's part of the stickiness of being in the spiritual world, I guess. Is the spiritual world, is that a thing? I get really turned off by the coaching industry and the fads. And like, at one point, my social media was like all these people that were also coaches. And you started to see the trends and the wording, or like the bold, shouty capitals, or like, oh, now we're calling everybody and calling everybody out, or we're doing shadow work. And it's like, you see these trends and it's just like, oh, okay. And it's not good or bad. It's just, for me, I wanted to bring my practice and I wanted to bring, my business, which is a spiritual business, into a quieter place so that I could, one, stay integrous, and two, really protect myself, because I don't forget that I got into this work because I didn't belong, because I didn't feel like there was a place for me in the world. And, the flip side of that is like you get a little power in you and you're like, I am the queen of the universe.
Yes.
And which I think every woman deserves to feel powerful, but how we use that power and how we gain that power. For instance, are you gaining power from other people or from validation, or is it from you sitting with yourself and knowing yourself really, really well and making decisions based on that connection? And I think these are two different things. And one is really hard to follow capitalism
right.
when you really know yourself. And I found, I was hiring when I first started, especially, I was like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. And, I want to do this full time. Like, how do I make that happen? So I hired a bunch of people, like coaches and business, like consultants, to tell me how to do it. And then I spent all this money to go like, oh, I hate this. Like, I don't want to do this formula. This formula doesn't work for me. And in my life, I'm finding that that's just a repeating theme, is that we're all so different that the formulas aren't the same for everybody. And that's why you can't manufacture it. And that's why you can't sell it in a way that's like one size fits all. It's just like farming. It's just like pregnancy. It's just like art. It's all of these things that are alive and natural and rhythmic to the earth, that it's just like another layer of like, yeah, no, it's one thing that works for someone doesn't work for everyone. And in the tradition of Hindu Tantra, you go work with your guru and you live with them, and you don't have that outside world experience all the time. And there's a mid ground. Like there was some modern gurus that were just like, oh, you can be a house, especially in Tantra, that was very taboo, of like, you can be a holder of this lineage and still have a family and still have a life, which I think is beautiful, because also in, Indian culture and in tantric traditions, they're still breaking boundaries and pushing boundaries and going, oh, okay, that's how you do things. In that, like, you usually have a stewardship underneath someone and you are devoted to them, not just worshiping them as a person, but as like the connection point to the divinity. And here, I mean, there are so many cults that I was just like, it's a rough go to like have that level of devotion. And I think in the West, we have to empower ourselves to make it our own, to separate the teaching from the teacher and really develop that own connection so that we don't get caught in those sticky relationships of if this person leaves me, then I'm left with nothing. Or if this person decides to do something that is morally against everything I stand for, is it going to shatter my psyche? You know, there's so many layers to it. And I don't shame. I try not to shame. I think there's a little bit in me that still wants to be like, but there's so much culturally. We love to hero worship. We love to celebrity worship. And in the spiritual world, it's like, oh, she just bought a house and a boat and is traveling and manifesting. And we're just like, of course I'm going to follow her because I want those things too. And then they have to produce content. Like once you reach that celebrity status, you have to turn out content. And some of it's like not based in anything. It's just their personal preferences for life, which is fine. But if someone's looking at you for spiritual guidance and you're like, oh, I don't eat sugar or carbs or the devil or whatever, that becomes part of the dogma.
And that's up for us right now as a culture. Like that is fucking up for us. I mean, I think we both dabbled in similar groups and different groups. And it was like, okay, I'm going to do this every single morning. And I'm like, there's, like you said, there is a space, of course, for discipline. Absolutely. But it gets really fucking sticky when it's like, we're all going to wake up at this time. We're all going to eat this food. The dogma thing is just a huge underbelly of spirituality becoming popular and hot right now, which it feels so gross to even fucking say that, but you get what I'm saying. Like I see it in the Snapchat of Insta, like I see, but that's why I love your work so much because it felt so true. And I was like, I know this person is doing this work because she feels alive by it. And I have to be honest, like I bought courses from people before where they're like, I just manifested 14 Mercedes. And I'm like, I'm in, you know what I mean? Like I have, I was like, oh, me too. I want that. But with you, I was like, oh, fuck. Like this person is dropped in and she's like doing the work and I want to be as alive as her, to the good, bad and ugly. Like I want to be turned into whatever, I think Abraham Hicks, but like, I want to be that like tuned in and tapped in. Like I want that. And so I appreciate that. Like you learned this lineage and you didn't bastardize it. I hate that even that word, but like, when we talked about this, our pre-call, it's like, we are two white women having this conversation. And I know for me, I have comments, but like I did a Tantra course. And in a way, that it helped me tremendously. In other ways, it was taught by a white woman who doesn't eat sugar. It's like that is, that community has its own dogma as well. So I just, again, I know we talked about this, our pre-call, but like we have to pay homage, that a lot of people are taking these lineages and making them their own and it's getting shady. So I'm glad that you're like, excuse me, no, like let's pay respect where respect is due. Yeah.
Well, and I think that one perspective on the zeitgeist of spirituality and Tantra specifically is like you come from a place of powerlessness. And Tantra is one of those paths where you get in contact with power. And it happens pretty quickly, whether you're ready for it or not, whether you have the musculature to carry that. And it moves and it's alive. And with that, we have to respect where it comes from. It's not this manifest destiny of, oh, well, it presented itself to me, so now it's mine. Like, there has to be a balance. And otherwise, it's kind of violent. Of course, energy is alive. And of course, the universe is alive. But the specific rituals and teachings and practices were kept alive by a people that have been oppressed and had to go underground and protect it with their lives. And a lot of people died to protect a lot of the knowledge and the hidden knowledge and the ancient knowledge. And that's not something we get to ignore. And it's not something that, oh, well, I felt this in my body. Now it's mine. And direct personal experience with the practice and energy is a key to all of it, to the transformation, to the alchemy, to the truth and the beauty of it. But in our culture, we experience this and we want to keep going with it. And a lot of people are like, okay, cool. Well, I'm going to do that by turning around and selling it and making money off of it. And it's something that I too had to look at and be like, I made this decision to profit off of teaching. And of course, as you know, a lot goes into coaching. You have to be disciplined. You have to be in that right place. You have to be working on yourselves. You have to be accountable. There's so many layers to it that takes a lot of work. And with that responsibility, you also, at certain phases of your life, have to be like, I need to step away for a little bit. I need to go handle my shit.
Yeah, I can't hold people right now if I want to be in integrity.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a natural cycle. And if that's your main livelihood and that's how you make your money and how you live, then that can be really scary to be like, the energy is just not here right now. And I'm not capable.
Preaching to the choir. Yeah, it's fucking scary. And honoring the truth. Instead of being like, I'm going to push through and hold a fucking wonky ass space for people and not be in integrity. I think that's why it's put such a distaste in both of our mouths. We're like, ew. Because you know when someone's fucking off and they're holding you. And I really want to talk briefly about the energy conversation, but I was like, oh, fuck. Like, because I was like, that's such a big part of this. But I was like, wait, I guess we should talk briefly, like, because I know we talked about this, like the Cliff Notes, the 101 version of like what is Tantra for someone's like, and also the like touching on that it's not just sexuality. So can you like tell, like if someone's like, I've always heard of like the Kama Sutra and that, like, can you give us like the most like cleanest version of what you know, I know that's like LOL to say, like, give us the clean, yeah, I'm like, that's a contradiction in itself. But for someone new to it, it's like, they're like, what is Tantra? Like, what do you do, Amy? Like, what would your answer be for that?
Tantra is a path of enlightenment, just like any yogic path. However, it really focuses on sexual energy being a catalyst to spiritual wisdom. So you have these direct experiences in your body, and it doesn't necessarily have to be sexual. And traditionally, it's not. There are rituals that engage with your breasts and with your genitals, but it's more about the energy of like, is your energy blocked here? Are you feeling your body? Is the energy flowing through these places in your body? Then it is about the exchange of sex. And a lot of the practices aren't sexual. You're doing breath work, you're doing bandhas, you're doing asana, you're doing practice. Mantra is a huge piece of it. Yantra, which are these beautiful geometric diagrams that are an imprint of energy. So you meditate with them and start to recognize them in your life outside of this picture. And it's super profound and wonderful. All of these elements that are half science and half art are really a good balance of finding your way to spiritual enlightenment. And people sometimes enter into Tantra through the back door. And they're like, no, I can't orgasm. Like, I'm going to study these practices because one of the side effects is orgasm and energy movement and pleasure, which is fine. It's just knowing that there is a history of it and it's deeply spiritual, and it's so that you get to know yourself and God better. that that's really what it's about. And sometimes if you just Google Tantra, it's all about sex. It's about different positions, how to please your partner, how to be the best lover, how to become the goddess, which is fine. It's just kind of like sprinkles on the cake. It's not really the what you came for. And it's not really the crux of the practices. And when Tantra engages in these sexual experiences, it doesn't even have to be physical. Some of the most profound experiences are your chanting mantra and your breathing and you're in touch with your body and the elements. And you're just visualizing that you're being with God. And those are some of the most profound shifts where in Tantra, the ultimate goal is to become the divine. You become the god or the goddess. And in a Western context, that doesn't make a lot of sense because we have a Christian God who's like cis white male who shakes his finger at you and judges everybody. So we think, oh, if we're going to be divine, we get to control a lot of people. We shame people. We tell people how to live. And that's where the discipline comes in of like, you got to shed that conditioning first. You got to get out of your own way. It's not in a context of what we already know. It's a deeper experience that a lot of times maybe we know we've just never had words for, but it's not within these contexts of what we've been taught and what we've seen replicated before. And whenever we start down this path, when you have these Kundalini experiences. So Kundalini is just dormant energy in your body. And in Tantra, you work on awakening this energy that kind of blasts through your system and it helps you mentally, physically, emotionally, energetically. And when this energy is not flowing, it can be very painful or very apparent once you start practicing. And when you awaken this Kundalini, it raises through your system. But what comes up must come down. And I think that that's a side of spirituality we don't always talk about is you're having these divine experiences. You're having these like incredible connections to who you are in the universe and this clarity. And you're finding your truth and your path. And then one day you're like, I don't feel it anymore. I'm not having these experiences. I don't feel divine or connected. I feel in the dark. I'm in a hole. I'm in a cave. It's kind of wet in here. Like something smells bad. Like, what do I do? And that's when the Kundalini also falls. Like it rises and it falls. And that can be a slow process. But that's where your musculature comes in and your devotion comes in. Of, are you going to continue the practices, even though you're not getting the results that you think you need or want?
That's huge. I'm thinking of, clients too, where I have to not collapse because it's easy for that, we're scared. We just invested our money and our time and then they start to freak out. They have these awakenings. And then the deal, like sometimes it ebbs and flows and then they will have a, panic moment of like, what the fuck, did it go away? And as a coach, someone holding, I have to trust and be like, it's okay. Like it's easy to get triggered in this culture and to also want to collapse with them and be like, fuck, it's like, I have to be like, no, this is part of, so I so hear you on that, like, especially holding space for people, like trusting and seeing that this is a process and it's not always going to be dancing around and all the awakenings and all the beautiful things. And I'm just thinking about like so many, this is such a personal topic for me, so it's just touching all of the things for me, and like I love that you said like we all came through, I definitely came through a back doorway. Like I thought it was very sexy, everyone like in the cute outfits and then I was like, ooh, like it's easy to, and I'm grateful for that. As much as I'm like, ooh, that was a weird way to enter. I'm like, all right, well, I entered. So we're grateful for that. Something I want to highlight is the discipline conversation you're having. So I'm curious, like I'm curious, like what your practice, and now you're pregnant, so I'm sure your practice looks much different, but I'm curious, like what your practice looks like. I mean, you're a high level practitioner. So like, could you talk about like what your practice looks like. And then for someone that's like brand fucking spanking new, I know it's going to be stark difference. Like, what would you suggest to like start as a
Yeah,
practicer?
I definitely wouldn't call myself a high level practitioner. I think my teachers would laugh and be like, ha, 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 ha. So cute. I am pregnant, and this has been a new initiation into life. My body's changing every day. I've been teaching nonstop. Well, I wouldn't say nonstop. I had breaks in between, but I've been teaching for solidly at least 5 years. And then I got pregnant, and it was like every time I would do breath work or chant mantra or do some of the movements, or especially like the pelvic floor exercises, I would vomit and get hot and like just want to pass out. And I'm like, oh shit, okay, this is different. And I think that for me, it's causing me to realize that I practice so that I'm connected, that I feel connected. I have a starting point of love and clarity, whether that's to my day or to any interactions that I have. I practice to keep the energy flowing. And when you're pregnant, you don't have a choice. The energy is flowing. You're creating life. And it is weird because you don't really have a hand in it. Life is creating itself, and you're a vessel. And, you know, my body is different. I smell different. I look different. I walk different. I waddle now. So it's all of these things. It's another layer of identity being shredded. And when I surrender to that, it's beautiful. I'm like, oh, I'm becoming a new phase of myself, you know, maiden into motherhood. This is awesome. And then those days where I just like want me back, it's brutal. It's a fight. It's uncomfortable. And, you know, for right now, I'm still settling into it. I'm halfway through my pregnancy. And it's a lot of what I've learned from my practices and a lot of what I've learned from my teachers going through this process. And I didn't realize, being a pregnant woman, like how much you have to advocate for yourself and how much you have to set boundaries and how much you really have to trust your intuition over someone who sounds more qualified, but it just, everything about it feels wrong. And I'm like, no, like I hear what you're saying, and I'm a logical person. I'm not insane, but that's just doesn't sit right with me. So I'm in that process right now. And, you know, we talked about it. Like, I vomit a lot. My body is just like, oh, do you smell that? Blah. And it makes it like right now I see one client a week, and that's my max. And I'm just okay with that. And, you know, I've been getting invited to do really cool things and teach in places that I've always wanted to teach in, or like really great opportunities with people. And I'm like, I'm not there. My body would never let me do this right now.
You're like, I'm sorry, no.
Yeah. I have like tears in my eyes, like, I can't, I'm so sorry. But that's life. It's like you practice and you practice, and then you let go, and then you practice and you practice, then you let go. And there's different inlets to Tantra as well. So like I said, we talked about yantra, which are the geometrical shapes, which are very artist driven. So people who have studied yantra, I don't teach yantra. It would take me years to master, to even try to be like, this is how you do it. But there are some great teachers. Sarah Tomlinson is one who is just incredible. And she paints them. She builds them with flowers on the floor. She uses sand and different elements. Like, it's just art, but it's also so profound in how it changes you. And, you know, that's one inlet to it. Mantra is another. Sound is so profound. Sound is one of those teachers that can get the train running, and it can also pump the brakes. And it's also a practice that I don't teach. So these are things that I appreciate in other teachers and I love them. Also not something that I teach. So I'm just kind of going through the list of different ways people come into this practice. And the other is through Tantra itself. So there's mantra, yantra, and Tantra. And Tantra is a set of rituals. And the ones that I study are from a specific lineage. But in order to participate in these rituals or to perform these rituals, you prepare your mind, body, and energy through, I use Kriya Yoga, which is a set of usually breath work, moving your body, which is asana, bandha work, which is sealing the energy into your body, knowing how to lock that energy and suspend it in your body, and meditation. Meditation is a huge tool to, I know everybody's like, to calm yourself and to be like more stress free. And it's like, also to blow your fucking mind open. Like some of the visuals and some of the practices in tantric meditation, they're very active. They're not passive of just letting in the noise around you, or it's not just like a Zen meditation. You're actively participating in creating this. And it's profound. It's mind blowing. It's life changing sometimes when you tap into these ancient images and you have these direct experiences with the universe and with the goddess or with Shiva himself. You know, sometimes those are my favorite. And through that practice, you just kind of, you get out of your own way. And I think that one of the easiest, most profound ways to start is breath work. I think that everybody breathes. Not everybody knows that they don't take a full deep breath or breathe correctly. And just learning how to breathe can open you up to realize, like, wow, if this can change, everything can change.
Right. What would be like the 101 version of like breathing correct, like, or taking a deep breath? Like, do you have suggestions for that? I know you help me breathe so in life. So I just actually had to take a deep breath and I was like, ooh, my shoulders are to my ear. Like I just felt things I didn't realize I was holding all day. So thanks for that reminder too. It was like, oh fuck, I was a little disconnected.
Yeah, I think that body awareness is part of it when you learn how to like take a deep breath. And when I say take a deep breath, it's through your diaphragm, letting your belly be soft. And I think after years, especially women, maybe men too, men probably get this too, of like holding in our bellies because we want to look posh. Like it's actually stopping our blood flow and it's stopping our breathing. And once we let our bellies be soft and learn how to fill our diaphragm when we breathe, so filling your belly first with air and then letting your chest rise, that can be profound, especially if you're used to shallow breathing in your chest. One, because it also is a trigger for your nervous system. If you're not taking deep breaths, then you're probably running in your mind all the time. You have this endless script going through your mind, and it's not your fault. It's just everything's connected. Your mind is listening to your body is listening to your mind. At that point, if you're in fight, flight, or freeze, your energy is just, it's too subtle to be paid attention to at that point. So a great place to start a good practice of learning your own energy is to calm down your nervous system by learning how to fully breathe and giving yourself that nourishment and slowing down enough to really listen to your body, which can be scary if you've never listened to your body before, if you've never felt a deep breath in your body and you take one for the first time. It can be really alarming.
Yes. Yeah. I'm so glad you bridged that gap though for energy. You know, because I think energy is a hot topic right now too. Like energy, you know, watch your energy leakages. And like, I'm so grateful that conversation is becoming more popular. But I'm grateful that you're like, let's start with breathing. You know, like that is such a, I'm just really grateful that you're like, that's a great starting point to the energy conversation and honestly to the embodiment conversation. Like, let's just breathe to get on board to then, further, those conversations. And I know we talked prior about like other quote unquote basic, but they're not basic tools people can start like with, like light touch and sensual eating. Do you want to take both of those, one of those, take a stab, explain it for people to start to
take a stab? Take a stab. I think for me, one of the tools in my toolbox that now I don't have to really set aside like 15 minutes a day to practice this. It's just something I naturally do, is touching my own body. And in a way, not just of feeling pleasure or having it go into that sexual realm, but checking in with my body. Like, this is my body. This is the body that I have been given and I am in charge of, and it's my vehicle and my temple to navigate the world. And it's so nuanced and tricky because in the spiritual game in the world, there's not a lot of room for disabilities, for chronic illness, for things that pop up. A lot of people are like, oh, you must have manifested it. And I'm just like, no, like the whole point of spirituality is, the fruits of the spirit: love, joy, peace, kindness, resilience. It's not money and fame and the perfect body. Like, that's not what you're going to get from this ultimately. And if you're doing the practice correctly and with any type of dedication, whether that's like a small grain of like dedication, the practice will work and will refine that piece of you that's like looking for the external validation still. But I love starting with breath, and I love starting with touch, because these are places, no matter if you're sick, if you have a disability, if maybe you just have chronic depression and feel so incapable of so many things, it's something universal where you're not broken. You can do this. You can lay a hand over your heart, feel your heartbeat, and you can breathe into your belly. And that in itself is profound and divine. And that's where, you can take these simple practices and have these profound experiences. It doesn't have to be a complex ritual. And when I say touch your body, you and I practice like a feather light touch, which is in some practices called an air touch. And it's intimate. Even if you're just doing it on your own arm, it's awakening nerve endings. It's calming down your nervous system. It's increasing blood flow. And where we're used to in the West, like a Swedish massage, where you're like, get in there, make it hurt, like deep tissue. This is very light and soft and tender. And I can't tell you how many classes I've taught where just a simple touch of your own skin. So many people are in tears. They're like, I've never touched my skin before. I haven't really checked in to my body. My body has so much to say. And it's a great practice. I use it to moisturize my body and also check in with myself. And now I have this baby growing in here, and I'm so grateful for my practices because, I can feel where the baby is. I can feel where my uterus is. Like, I can feel what's going on. And I'm really sensitive to it, good or bad. I'm really sensitive to it because I've for so long made the relationship to my body my priority. My health, mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, has been my number one priority. And part of the benefits of that is not that life becomes easier. It's just, yourself better.
Yeah, that's, I think, a big one that we buy into, of like, everything's going to be fine when I have the 14 Mercedes. It's like, that's not the point of this. I think you hit the nail on the head. It's like that's beautiful. Is there any like, this is a general question. I know with me, we were like read books together and all that. Again, for someone that's 101, just entering this world, like, of course, it's not like we talked about, it's not for everyone. So like, do you have any like resources? Of course, we'll talk about your work, your beautiful books, like we'll get there, but like, what's an other like books, resources that you love to share with people that are just entering this world, if any?
Oh, wow. Okay. Put me on the
I
spot.
know, I'm sorry.
It's okay. I think that instead of like me, because everybody has their own way. And I remember reading every book I could get my hands on and it doing nothing for me. And it wasn't until I found a teacher and my body was like, yes, this, that it started working for me. And it's not something, Tantra traditionally isn't something that's taught through a book. And it's almost laughable. It's like, yeah, once you have these experiences, then go back and maybe read something and be like, oh, I've experienced this, or I have a context for this. Otherwise, you're either going to be really confused or you're going to be pretending a little bit of like, yeah, I've had that. I've experienced that. I could do that. So it's really important to follow your own way there. And if there's a teacher or someone who you resonate with, that you feel alive with, that you're like, that feels good and true for me, start there. And believe me, you'll have many teachers in your life. And sometimes you have to leave teachers behind. Sometimes they leave you behind. And it's really you still got to go on the journey.
Yep.
You don't just like cautiously take all the right steps. No, you fail. You hire someone, you get hurt, you fall down, you try again, you find the beauty, you keep going. That's also part of it. And there are books that I think are great. But if you're starting out on this path, I don't think it's necessarily helpful to read a book other than actually finding a teacher or going to a class. I think that that's way more potent.
Agreed. I'm with you. I'm actually, I have a book over there. I think maybe one or, that we talked about or in my classes. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll talk about that book. And I'm actually looking at it now. And I remember both the joy and the frustration it gave me because I was like, oh, I finally can have the words for this thing. And then I was fucking pissed because it didn't. You know what I mean? Like it didn't give it, I did read it pretty ego based. You know what I mean? I was like, ooh, like I'm going to get this book and it's going to make me, and I was like, motherfucker, you know what I mean? Like it just was like another invitation of like, do the work. You know what I mean? Like it didn't satiate me in the way that I wanted to get that little ego hit. So I'm so glad yeah.
There are no quick fixes. And that's also why Tantra is not for everyone. Like it's a path and it's a dedicated path. And a lot of teachers say, once you get initiated on this path, you can't just leave. You can't just step off the path. Like you're still in it. You're still on your journey. And good or bad.
Yep, you're on. You're on.
You're on it.
I had like so many questions that I don't even think who the fuck cares. I was like, I wanted because I know with you we could free flow. So I was like, I had the structure and I was like, burn the structure down. You know what I mean? I was like, let it burn. But before we wrap and we talk about you and your work, like, is there anything that you want to voice that you think it's important to like? I know we briefly talked about energy and embodiment. Like, is there anything else that you're like, I really want people to know this if this is the only thing they ever hear about Tantra or anything else that you feel called to share?
Mm. Yeah, I think Tantra is an incredible path, but I also think that it's not the only path out there. So if you're like wanting embodiment and pleasure and power and all of that, it doesn't have to look one way. You don't have to go down the rabbit hole, so to say. And I think a lot of people who practice and study Tantra, that some of the best teachers that I've met, you don't know they're a teacher. Like you don't know that they are devoted to this practice. You just notice something about them. You're just like, there is an aliveness or a brightness about you. And I think the older that I get and the more that I've learned to let go in this, Tantra shows up in my life, not just as me as a teacher, but in art, in community, and how I hold myself and my pregnancy. It's everywhere. It's farming for me. There's so many ways that it presents in my life and solidifies that isn't just on a yoga mat. And I think that that's so important because we're not all designed to be yoga teachers. We're not all designed to be following this formula over and over and over again, because then, you're just going to sit in a room full of people like yourself, and we're never going to learn. And it's not going to be this beautiful fabric that life can be. So, like, follow the path if you're called, dive in 100%, but then let go and let it be whatever it needs to be and whatever wants to come out of you. I think there's some things that got pulled out of me that I was just like, I don't know about this. How does this fit in? Like, why is this a part of my life? My path is this, and I know my path. And over and over again, it's just like, shut up.
Exactly. And like you said, this is not the path for everyone. Like, it is a path. So it's not for everyone, but I'm so glad that you normalized the conversation today. I think it's this weird, mysterious thing, especially in, like we talked about, in the spiritual realm. It's like very glamorized. It's very, celebrity, like it's very, and I think that's what, like I said, it was dark, but that's what allured me to it. I was like, yes, I want to watch, yes, I want to wear a bodysuit and teach a jade egg class. Like I like it. And I was like, yes, that's hot. Right? And then I was like,
it's fucking fun.
I was like, that's sick. And then I was like, fuck, this is bringing up so much shit. You know what I mean? So I thank you for both, showing us the whole spectrum and also encouraging us with tools and all the things. And you have so much to teach. I've learned so much, working with you, but also being in your realm and being your friend. Like, where can people find you? How can they, like, again, to the listeners, this person is the real fucking deal. So, like, get into her world. So how do they do that?
Yeah, I think Instagram right now is the one inlet that I'm like touch and go and comfortable. But if you look on there right now, it's like I started a project in Kauai with my best friend. And so we have an art collective that I'm so stoked on. And it's like serving the community and it's fun. So you're going to see like my Tantra work. You're going to see like my sense of humor. You're also going to see like my other business. So it's, for me, life is like a broad spectrum right now. And I'm not super like, I'm going to give you all the tips and rituals through Instagram. Like I've never really worked like that. And it's not what that is, but to connect and like have a conversation or reach out. Instagram is like my jam right now. So Amy.Jindra is my Instagram handle. I do have a website, womanandme.com, where you can reach out to get a consultation call. You can purchase my poetry books. So that's available too. Yeah. And I think that a lot of people reach out and they're just like, where do I start? And it's like, oh, I actually know a teacher who lives near you, who's fantastic. Like, reach out, see if it's a match. Like, it's not always just like, oh yeah, sign up for this program. And right now I like am getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And like, I like walk across the room and get out of breath. So it's just like, it's funny to me is that, going on a podcast, I had the thought of like, I'm not promoting anything right now. So I'm just coming to chat.
I'm fucking thrilled. Like, it's so nice.
I don't have anything to sell you right now. Like, I'm not taking on new clients until, one, I have this baby, and two, we see if the baby is like chilling.
Yes. You're like, we'll decide from there.
Yeah. We'll know when.
Yes. But people can buy your books right now and they could be in your world, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Again, like I could talk for like, this was you're so easy to talk to. And I'm just like, it reminds me of like how wonderful you are and how in integrity you are. And it makes me like love the work again. You know what I mean? Because again, we've both been scarred. Yeah. And anyone that does this work in whatever capacity has some wounds, of like not being held and not being, with people in integrity. So you just remind me about the work and why I love it so much. And I'm fucking obsessed with you. So thank you so much for coming on.
Well, I love you too. And sometimes I'm like sweaty and I'm like, she's putting things, like saying things. And I'm like, that's a lot of pressure, girl.
All good things, though. It's all true. You're a fabulous human being, and I love you, and thank you for coming on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course. Thank you, seriously, thank you so much for joining me on today's episode and on this podcast journey. And if you loved what we talked about today, and you know another human who could definitely benefit from what was discussed, I would so appreciate if you would go ahead and share this podcast with them. Don't forget, hit subscribe or follow so you never ever miss an episode. And the great news is you can always follow me, my work, my blog, my podcast on my website at www.wethelight.org. And hey, remember, life is so much brighter when we shine. I'll see you next time.